What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo on a Sunday. I hope everybody's doing okay. I was able to be in the full conversation of the Psionics meeting that Ubiquity University organized. We had people like Ross Coulthart, Jake Barber, Sean Esbjorn Hargens, who has the concept of the super experiencer, which I've covered on this channel. And we had Chris Bledsoe talking. It was an interesting combination of people. I'm just going to let you guys know what I felt overall about this meeting. The general sensation of people that have been following UFOs for a while or for not so long, since 2017, for example. Many of these people feel like the nuts and bolts are like it, and they're married to that idea. And I mean, it could be, but I feel like closing ourselves to that other possibility about using consciousness and all that stuff, I don't think it's smart, because I get that some of the red flags, right, that are happening, that I need to address before I take a look at what Jake Barber said, because I'm going to talk about his definition of psionics and many of the concepts that I've been covering here for a while. He talked about that, especially this consciousness field, which Grinberg called the neuronal field. I think it was very interesting that he mentioned that, and I agree. But there are also a few things that I think need to be talked about, or, yeah, like just acknowledged and fixed if there's a problem, before we continue down this path of, yeah, psionics is a thing. We get that the word is uncomfortable for a lot of people. I happen to think it's the same as ESP, for example, which to me, it's really that. They just renamed it and it's okay. Psionics is kind of a cool word, to be honest with you. But there's a lot of people that are like really not liking the whole vibe of this. And I completely understand. I do have my concerns and I have to share them with you. I don't know if you guys know, but attorney Danny Sheehan recently was on a show called New Thinking Aloud, and he talked about some aspects that are darker from the psionics program. And I think that his statements and the statements of Dr. Stephen Greer, that I know a lot of people don't want to take him seriously, and some even have unsubscribed from my channel for covering his stuff. I think he's one of the players within the whole landscape of this disclosure movement. And I don't think ignoring him is a good idea. I think everybody should be paid attention to see what they're doing. So from that aspect, you have statements from those two very important people within the context of UFO disclosure. And they're making statements that are very concerning to a lot of people, because we're talking about people forcefully being placed under the influence of something, and even underage people being exposed to this. And some nasty consequences too were mentioned. Sheehan mentioned misconduct, but it's not just misconduct. And as you guys know, I've been trying to follow the trail of whatever happened to Dr. Grinberg and the mysterious accidents that people like Dr. John Mack or Itzhak Bentov and others have gone through. And yes, they were deemed accidents, of course. But it is really strange that people that are getting to certain places, breaking certain paradigms through their investigations, suddenly something happens. And I think that needs to be addressed, because it seems to be tied directly to the study of consciousness. So the other major concern that I had was with everything that I'm telling you guys right now that needs to be investigated. Often there have been maybe a confused kind of conversation, because these names of aerospace companies that are big have been regarded as the villains of the story for a long time. We don't know that for certain, but that's what's been happening. They've been deemed the ones who are keeping this like secret from everybody, right? So in that context, it is really interesting that, for example, Mr. Ross Coulthart and even Jake Barber have made statements in favor of those companies. And I think that is also an aspect that needs to be specifically clarified and addressed, just so we know what's the deal with these companies. Where do they stand? I know that it's been a long time. It's been many decades since they were created. The majority of people working for those companies have no idea about these programs, just the specific divisions there, you know? I mean, they know they exist, but they don't know what goes on there because it's highly, highly secretive. So if these programs exist, so I would just like to know or have some clarity. And I guess everybody else who's doubting this too, because today Jake Barber was actually, when he was talking, there was like a in the back, there was an announcement or like promo of something that was very familiar from a tweet that George Knapp presented a few days ago. And if you like make a comparison between the two, it's pretty clear that the picture that George Knapp posted is a photo of a Northrop Grumman announcement of a craft that they have. And I guess it's recent. And it seems like a very similar picture Jake Barber has on his background. So that is a hint that yes, Jake Barber perhaps is working with one of these companies. And I don't know if he works for others, but that's seems to me like a little signaling, you know? And yeah, if you do, be nice to for the people to know what's the deal with those companies. What have they been doing all this time? Why should we trust them in the first place if they're potentially the ones that started with this secrecy and everything, or part of what started? So that's another concern that I guess everybody should have, I think. But on the bright side, though, it is very evident that Jake Barber is very knowledgeable in aspects of consciousness studies because the conversation he had on this Ubiquity University Psionics Summit pretty much describes the way that us as humans have the capacity to interact with this field of consciousness and play with it. And that's obviously one of the concepts that Dr. Grinberg talked about and the very core of his Syntergic theory, which states that this field of consciousness that he calls a neuronal field and the lattice of creation of reality interact. We make them interact as humans, and that is what creates the experience of reality. And we do it often every day just by actions. It is a process. It is not like magic, like I just snap my fingers and something is going to appear or materialize in front of me. There are some aspects of that in the past, but it's really, really difficult. You need to be at an extreme level of coherence within your hemispheres, you know? And this is what Jake Barber is talking about here. But yeah, it sounds like he is trying to really get to the bottom of this. And probably and more than likely, he doesn't have any more connection with these companies. Maybe he does. I don't know. But I don't know. It's just really weird that one of these companies, and there's also another connection, friendly connection to these companies. If you guys don't recall, Tom DeLonge is really good friends with two major executives at Lockheed Martin. And that's essentially the same thing, right? So it would be really cool if we got to hear from them. And now that everything is coming out and in the open so much, because there is a certain level of checks and balances is important. And I think that, yeah, many of these people that maintain the secrecy for so long many of them are no longer with us, but many of these traditions did continue. The secrecy did continue. So, what's a healthy way of addressing that and keep moving forward? That's what I want to know. And we can talk about the last concern that I do have is that now that this conversation came forward, there's obviously going to be people that are disinforming the population about what psionics is, because that's the MO that has taken place in the UFO community forever, since it started, basically. That there are always disinformation people talking about the topic in a friendly fashion, but not telling the truth. And there are even documentaries about this. So that is one aspect that really, really concerns me, because it's really difficult to gauge who has what intention in all of this. You guys will have to use a little discernment to identify those, especially if you are following the topic quite a bit, you know? So let's see what we can do with this Jake Barber conversation. What I'm going to play for you guys is a Red Panda Koala clip. Shout out Red Panda Koala. He watched the whole thing and he got a 10-minute clip here that we're going to be watching and pausing so we can continue the conversation. And I will let you guys know how long it takes, but let's see.
Explain in your own way what you mean by psionics.
For sure. Yeah, psionics, it's kind of a fun word. What do I mean by psionics? Well, I can share what my understanding of it is. Psionics, I think, let me back up and say that, I didn't get into this world of psionics or consciousness, through the front door, let's say. It wasn't something I was pursuing or that I had a background in educationally. I came in through a window, if you follow me with that analogy. And so I took an interest in it because of my own experience that happened at a very unexpected time in my life.
Okay, so what Jake Barber is talking about here is the effect of trauma that he went through when he had these experiences, and then he was thrusted into trying to understand what was happening to him. And this happens to pretty much all of us who had these type of experiences. An experience close to death is very similar. What he experienced and what he described on the Ross Coulthard show, the way he felt, that is very similar to what I felt when I was afraid that I was going to die. I don't know what it is, but it feels very similar. And I think that unless you actually grow up for example, if you come from a country where they have these traditions of the esoteric or the spiritual, not necessarily from a religious standpoint, a lot of these people do have different interpretations of things, and they're more used to this type of conversation because that's what they grew up with. I'm guessing Jake maybe wasn't that, didn't have that childhood. So that's why he says that he went through something traumatic that made him start looking into psionics. So that's one example. There are other examples. I, for example, did grow up with a lot of different doctrines, if you can call them that, of studies of consciousness and spirituality. And my mom was always dabbling into these topics. She made me read a lot of books about different topics, diametrically opposed, from like Gestalt to the weirdest, tackiest thing you can possibly imagine. I'm not going to name any names, and I got to experience these types of conversations from a different lens. Although I did have a while there when I severely judged everything that my mother wanted to share with me, because I was a teenager, and you know how teenagers are. They tend to be like, come on, mom, they get embarrassed. And that's how I felt for a long time. And then I started with this psychedelic trip from 17 to 27 years old, basically, that ended in that near-death experience. And that completely changed my entire perception of what reality is. There are many things that I do regret about doing, mainly those that hurt my loved ones. Those I do regret. But I did learn quite a bit. I read a lot of books dedicated to these topics, and it wasn't just about psychedelics per se. It was about perception and Terence McKenna and Aldous Huxley and Carl Jung and different people. I didn't get fully into the UFO topic, but I researched quite a bit about consciousness because there's that obvious connection when you are on a psychedelic trip. So I realized later what the connection was, but it's been like a really long journey for me. And I've never seen a UFO. I don't think I've never seen like actual physical somethings, you know. I've seen lights in the distance that I don't understand and move weird, but I don't know. That could have been anything, you know. That happened twice. And but yeah, in terms of consciousness, that is like something that I've been experiencing for decades now. And it's really interesting to see the whenever you enter into a room, there's a certain level of interaction with other people's space, you know. And when that happens, there's a lot of looking and a lot of posturing and moving that has to do with a certain level of a low level of telepathy that goes on without the necessity of speaking or opening your mouth. Just through action, you already understand what people are doing. And it's funny because we don't get it. That is also a certain level of telepathy, like a lower level. You don't hear people's voices or thoughts, but you understand what's happening spatially, and just by looks, you understand something. That is something that can be taken to a high level. And this is what Jake Barber is about to talk about.
But since then is when I've really began to explore what that really does mean. And I'm excited to share that with others. And my message is one of invitation, not education. I'm not here to insist or sell people on the idea they should take my interpretation of my experiences and my subsequent education through the pursuit of knowledge of and personal understanding of what it means. But I want to invite everyone to get out there and play with this thing, because what's beautiful is that it's available to everyone. And one of the analogies that's helped me look at this is the idea of the World Wide Web. Like if you think of consciousness as the World Wide Web, and the degree to which we can play within that field of consciousness is something like psionics, then I think you're on a good track. And it might not, I've thought about this recently, it might not even be an analogy. It might like literally be a form of digital intelligence or digital consciousness that the World Wide Web might be evolving into. You know, that's yet to be determined. But you know, why is this hard to understand, or why is it abstract for people? Again, this is where I think analogies are helpful. You know, so if you think of a field of consciousness like the internet, it's around us all the time. It's full of information. It's a two-way thing. People contribute. You can upload to it. You could download from it, but you can't see it. Like I couldn't point to it here in this room. And so our ability to connect to that World Wide Web is done through something like a Wi-Fi connection. And I think some of the challenges, even with the practical applications of that, are rooted in our own ego. You could think of our ego like a smartphone. Let's say you have the latest version of the Apple smartphone, and you're like, this is the smartest phone there is. It's got all these widgets on it. It's got this much gigabyte. It's got this fancy of a camera. But for some reason, you're still not able to use it to tap into the field of consciousness. Well, I would say that that's because you're in airplane mode. And so people need to learn how to activate the Wi-Fi on their cell phone to tap into this field of consciousness. So, you know, it also helps for me to think about, the difference between our intelligence, our knowledge, our wisdom, and then our intuition. So intuition is a word that we find ourselves using a lot when we talk about consciousness. And why I think that is because intuition is a little bit different than the first three. Someone with good intuition or a high level of knowledge or a high level of intelligence or a high level of wisdom, you would probably in general say, hey, those are smart people. Like what makes people smart, like the smartphone. And I think it's important to kind of differentiate between those four. And this is what I have done that has helped me out a lot. When you think of knowledge, let's just say, is like rote information. You have the ability to retain and share knowledge. Like you could go on Jeopardy and clear all the categories on Jeopardy. That's rote knowledge. But the practical application of that knowledge is something different. So that moves us more into like, well, you're smart, but you're not very intelligent. Is that possible? Perhaps, because I look at intelligence more as like a set of problem-solving skills. You can solve problems. And then the other category over here, wisdom. Well, what is wisdom and how is that different than knowledge and intelligence? Well, wisdom to me seems to be something like the ability to make good decisions, fruitful decisions. And then lastly, well, intuition. How would you differentiate intuition? And intuition is something like being able to make the right decision at the right time. And it's something like this internal bell. It's how I think of it, that can ring true inside of your being. And when something rings true, there's really no explanation as to why you're attracted or oriented to it, but it's leading you a certain way. And so I feel every human has this bell that can ring true inside of them, and that's your intuition, and it can drive decision making. So, to pull this back to, what is psionics? I think psionics is our ability to play within the consciousness field for desired outcomes, rather than just connect to it. So again, to stick with this analogy, the World Wide Web, imagine, okay, you figured this out, you've connected to the field of consciousness, and I'll talk about how, crudely, how I understand to do that and what's been successful for me so that other people can try this on their own. But imagine you're connected and you get a Google search bar. You have to put something in that search bar. You're connected, but you have to have some intention. And intention is a really important thing, because without intention, you have no driving force. And if we consider that maybe every living thing in the universe has access to this consciousness field, you need to bring intention in order to find what you're looking for. So you have to populate that search bar with something. And so bringing some good intentions, what you consider good, which at the most fundamental level, without getting, to angels and demons on you, is just to go there with the intent that it's going to be worthwhile and you're going to find something that is worthwhile to you. And I think finding that space is really important if you're going to try and connect to the field of consciousness.
So this thing about intention is, just to give you guys one of the examples, Grinberg, when he started studying Pachita, to those who know who Pachita is, she's a shaman who used to be a healer, and Jacobo Grinberg decided to go study her for a few weeks. He ended up staying for 2 years, and because he tried to debunk whatever he saw there. And he claims in his book that he saw Pachita materializing objects from thin air and doing surgeries that even today are impossible. That's what he claims. Pachita was famous for telling people who went for a surgery or for some type of ailment that they were under, that she needed their belief in order to perform this surgery to them. And that if they didn't believe, it wouldn't work. And a lot of them didn't work because of that. But Jacobo claims that he was there, and that he saw many did work. And they're like still impossible to this day. Science fiction-y would be the best description. Other people who were also studying this phenomena who went with Pachita are Spanish parapsychologist Salvador Freixedo and Chilean author Alejandro Jodorowsky. And they were also completely baffled by what they saw, according to them. So this has to do with that. Pachita was like an extreme level of someone who could play with that consciousness field at will. And another thing that you guys should know, Pachita believed that when she performed these surgeries, she was possessed by the last Aztec emperor, Cuauhtemoc. I don't know if that's true. That's what she claims. And I just wanted to let you guys know what a good example of this belief and this level of interaction with that field to an extreme would probably look like, you know. I was very happy to hear Jake talking about this, talking about intention, talking about intuition, which was very important as well. I think it's a major part that drives a lot of this. Good intuition. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about what Jake Barber explained here about psionics. Do you resonate with what he says? Do you have any concerns of yourself besides the ones that I already mentioned, which I think are valid? You know, I don't think I'm asking for too much. And I'm not asking anything from Barber himself. Even if he knew what was going on there, I don't think he would be able to tell us because he would be under a NDA or something like that. And I just want to know if there's any way to seek for answers for what seems to have happened and probably keeps happening. Mysterious things that took place surrounding the whole psionics aspect of the phenomenon. That would be nice to know. Maybe he can point us in the right direction. Maybe I'm asking too many questions. I certainly hope not, because you guys are already talking about psionics here, and I don't think I'm asking too many questions. I think it's pretty fair to ask about inconsistencies like these, you know. And while other people keep debating on whether this psionics thing is real or not, I prefer to go to the data, see the correlations, and it's pretty evident that something has been taking place related in some way to these terms, these words. So that's what I'm following. I don't know what really happened, but it would be nice to know. And yeah, I wanted to ask you, what about your interaction with this field, this neuronal field? Which protocols do you think are good to like get us more familiar with it? And one last thing, which I think it's very important, and I think it should be pondered. Making contact with non-human intelligence seemed to be like the topic of conversation during this psionics summit. And there were some people who claimed that they're in contact with beings from other planets. They named the planets. I think that talking about that specific aspect of this is a little too far in the distance still, because, and I'm going to explain what my perspective is, the vast majority of people still don't accept that this is a thing. And not acknowledging that psionics are a real thing or that there is something to them means that you're not even going to inquire about what are the natures of psionics. What type of things can I do? If there is a new way in which we can communicate amongst ourselves, why don't we master that first and communicate properly instead of how we communicate right now? Because it clearly isn't working. I mean, you can see the division in the world. Why don't we worry first about learning how to use this to communicate better, to fix whatever problems we have right here? And then if we get to that next step, then we can start trying to make contact with other intelligences that, by the way, we don't even know what their intent is. Jake Barber talks about intent. How about intent from whatever that is? Why isn't it possible that this feeling of like overwhelming love and this feminine energy, why couldn't it be something that they use to disarm you? It's completely possible. We can't rule out anything. And that is definitely one of the potential possibilities. So, why don't we first understand our own tools that we have, and then we can worry about trying to make contact with something? I don't know, just floating an idea there. It's kind of concerning to just like straight up go to, yeah, I was talking to Ralph from Zeta Reticuli. Really? And have you fixed your issues with your dad or your mom? You know, it's weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like tripping and maybe I'm just too sensitive. I don't know. Maybe I am. But I would worry about that first before trying to make contact with other beings. Get along, us get along first, and then try to get along with others. I don't know. I sound like a broken record by this point. So let me know what you think about Jake Barber's definition of psionics. What do you think about this neuronal field? What do you think about my concerns? And what do you think about the whole conversation overall? It lasted over 3 hours. I'm gonna leave a link in the description. And if anyone from Skywatcher wants to be on the show and talk about all this, my DMs are open, guys. So if you guys want to see any of the Psionics teams people on the show, you can ring them on X. They're on X, Skywatcher HQ. Let them know. But yeah, if you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you can get notified when a new video drops. If you want to support the channel in any other way, there are a bunch of links in the description. You can also access the members channel. And we're also on the KGRA website. So thank you for the support. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Remember, stay curious. Bye.